We are here at the Ballast Pile Bar, located here in Freeport, Grand Bahama, and we welcome you to the Motherlode, our new podcast with the goal of discussing historic shipwreck recovery in the Bahamas. We are your hosts. I'm Dr. Michael Pateman, curator of the Bahamas Maritime Museum, and this is
Dan Porter, and we'll be talking about a lot of other things, the operational side of everything, the archaeology, people that worked here in the past, and a whole myriad of other things.
We have a whole bunch of topics to cover. But we are very excited to bring this podcast to you, and this is our very first episode. But before we get started, let's first acknowledge our sponsors, Shopwalkers Key, Maravillas Rum, Bahamas Maritime Museum, and Visit the Bahamas.
The number one sponsor, Allen Expeditions, Carl and Gigi Allen, and they're making this all happen and changing the industry as we know it.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. So the islands of the Bahamas have a very long history of shipwrecking and the recovery of materials from these shipwrecks. Some of these stories are good, some of them are bad, and some of them are just ugly. But one of the goals of this podcast is to bring these stories to light, but also to highlight the really good work, as Dan said earlier, of island exploration. But before we start talking about all of that, Dan, you have had a very long career in historic shipwreck recovery. And coincidentally, that started right here in the Bahamas. So why don't you tell us about how you got started here?
Sure, Mike. Before I actually came to the Bahamas, I came to the Bahamas 3 days out of high school, and with my first diving job and the first real historic shipwreck hunt we ever did. I grew up in the industry. My father was in the industry working with some of the salvors on the 1715 fleet on the east coast of Florida. And I grew up with coming home from high school and piles of treasure being on the table from my father's efforts with Mel and Mo Molinar and John Brandon and just a whole number of other people.
So where was this?
That was in the east coast in Florida.
So the 1715
fleet. I was just amazed by that. And since then, I've just been, I had the bug and I was on the boats and I'd found my first coins on the shores of Fort Pierce, Florida, and the East Coast, and at the age of about 8, on the beach with land machines and finding Spanish coins. So I was hooked. So I got through high school, and I got a phone call from John Brandon, like I said, 3 days out of high school in 1980, to come work the La Calle wreck right off the south shores of Grand Bahama. And man, we found all kinds of treasure, and then. That was when I really started learning about archaeology and how to do the proper data recording and really map the sites as we were working. And that started the whole thing, Mike.
No. So you mentioned you found a lot of coins, but you also found, I'd say, a pretty special artifact out there.
Very special artifact. And that was about 10 years later. The early 80s is when I came and we found the bulk of the coins. And I came back and worked with John Brandon again in 1991, I believe, and 91, 92. And we went out to the same site and used advancements in technology, a little bit better metal detectors, and just being a little more methodical. And I was working on, in the hard bottom areas around La Calle, and I found a mariner's astrolabe. It was amazing, and I got the hit on top of the reef, and it took us 4.5 hours to chisel it out.
Wow, 4.5 hours.
4.5 hours of because as soon as I got down enough to realize what it was, I immediately got John over to look at it and said, "Hey, I didn't want to say the word. I said, but I think this is an astrolabe. It's an astrolabe or some type of plate." But as soon as John seen it, we went back up to the surface, and he says, "Look, that's an astrolabe." So we slowed way down. We were very, very careful, very methodical, and covered the whole area and got it. It was encapsulated under solid limestone.
Oh, wow!
And that just shows how much this reef grows and the limestone grows out there over the period of the wreck sank in 1628. So just that period of time was encapsulated. It couldn't have been any more encapsulated if you'd have poured it in a solid bucket of concrete.
Wow. But
an extremely important find. It was dated 1602. Portuguese bronze metal urgis made it, and it was Diaz, I believe was his name, and a fascinating find. Of all the recoveries I've made my whole life, and I've been pretty fortunate to make some pretty significant finds on many different shipwrecks, that is the most significant historic artifact that I've ever found at Mariner's Astrolabe. I'm very proud of it.
Right.
You know?
Well, before we move on, though, I think you should explain what a Mariner's Astrolabe is, because we might have some newbies in our audience.
Okay. Well, Mariner's Astrolabe is the forerunner of basically all modern day navigation. And what they would do is they would hold it up and they would have what's called an alidade with 2 holes in it. And at noon every day, they would sight the horizon, and the only information you could get from an astrolabe was the latitude.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't give you the the horizontal, it wouldn't give you the longitude, but it would give you the latitude. So when the sailors came out of the New World and they were going back to the Old World, back to Spain, they needed to know when they could turn to miss the Bahamas, and they tried to get past Bermuda too, because that was out there, but they would get caught up in the Gulf Stream and know when to make the hard push back to the east and make it back home with all their treasure. So very significant find. Very
And
proud.
I think that was number 79 in the whole world, or somewhere around there.
It was real close. I believe it was number 70, but I might be wrong. It's 70, 79 in that area. I think nowadays, I think they're up to maybe about 110 in that area. But there's Felipe Castro, works with Texas A&M.
Well, used to work there.
Used to work. Done a very in-depth archaeological report and catalog of Mariner's Astrolabes, and very proud to have that in there. One of the most significant finds.
Yeah. Well, and so we talked about already how Carl and Gigi, they do things a little differently. They actually brought that piece back here to the Bahamas.
They brought many pieces back and brought them back and repatriated the stuff into the Bahamas. And it's an exhibit. It's on exhibit in the Bahamas Maritime Museum. Mike, I'm very proud of that, and proud of the methodology that they're using in collecting these artifacts and their on-site work. I've been operations managers for many companies over the past 10 or 15 years. I've tried to keep the evolution of the industry and the advancements of how we do things, not only the methodology, but the archaeology and the data recording and building databases and everything else. That's my goal here.
Mm.
And I think that working with Mr. Allen and Gigi and Mrs. Allen, I think that they're the purists here. They're the ones that are here not with greed in their heart, but they want to see the data recorded. And there's many other shipwrecks that we've been collecting the data on too. So very proud to be working with them and helping evolve the industry to where it is today. And then it doesn't need to go leaps and bounds, but just, okay, this is a better methodology. Let's just take it up one notch in the ladder, and then go to the archaeology side, one notch. And go to the physical aspects of working on the site and the operational side, one notch in the ladder. And, and having an open mind and be able to listen to everybody from academics to specialists, and people that have worked in the past, people that are planning to work in the future, and reviewing technology. Technology is the key here, and that's how we've been very successful with using advanced metal detectors, mapping and plotting technology. The advancement of GPS, took the world by storm in this industry.
And it actually changes how you work today versus how you worked when you first started.
Very much so, very much so. And just the database, actually incorporating a major, very refined database that can take you all the way to different mints and reigns of the coins. We can tell you every Mexican coin from any site we came from. We can tell you any coin from Potosi or Cartagena or Bogota. We can pick out anything and refine our search is there and plot it back into our on-site charts, and just very proud to be working here and looking forward to taking it further in the future.
Yeah, and although Dan only mentions coins, it's not just coins that we can plot back. Every artifact that we find is mapped.
Yep.
Even the artifacts we leave in situ, are left in place. We record, hey, we left this here. This is what we left.
Mike, every single spike, EO, cannonball, pottery shard, just everything gets recorded, and then we can break it down. And we only want to see where the cannonballs went, and that defines which section of the ship we're working on. Or we only want to see the ballots. Well, we know that's lower hull structure, and so that's the big thing, is figuring out the matrix of these wrecks, and that helps us do predictive modeling.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's all about. And man, it's been working really good here.
Yeah. And actually, a lot of this has formed how things have changed here in the Bahamas. We look at part of my career, I actually looked at what happened in the Bahamas from they first started issuing licenses until the moratorium in 1999. And there's just a lot of difficulties between some treasure hunters not being completely honest, and actually in some cases, the government not being completely honest. And that's one of the things that we try to do different, is to keep everybody honest.
You know, there's a lot of romance in the word treasure hunter and treasure hunting, and that's how it all started. But with what we're doing, we've interjected a degree of science in it, and I'm very proud to evolve out of. Although it's still romantic, when you find treasure, when you find a big emerald brooch or gold earring like we found the last trip, that puts that element into it. But you know, being professional historic shipwreck salvers is where we're going with this whole thing. And like I said, advancement of the whole industry. That's where we need to go. Mm-hmm. And it's the data. The data is the most important thing. If we don't believe the data, or if anybody doesn't collect data real time, then as far as I'm concerned, it's corrupt data. And corrupt data to me is no data.
Yeah.
You know?
And the key thing about the data that people don't understand, we have Defense Force officers on our boat to actually watch in real time what we're doing. All of this stuff is recorded in the database or in the spreadsheet for us. These things are then brought back to the lab, where the government rep who sits in our lab and the Defense Force officer signs off on it and says, this is what was brought into the lab. It's also signed off by the captain, most times you, and then signed off by me in the museum and lab. So we have,
and then an AMMC representative in the laboratory. And a lot of times, Mike, we have the actual Defense Force officers, if there's multiple on the boat, they actually help collect the data. They're actually entering the data into our vessel database to be imported into the historic database. So and everybody's working really well together. I'm very proud to be here.
Yeah. And some of the things that make us different, just the Wreck Watch magazine that's sitting right here next to us. This is actually a public presentation that we made where people can actually read about the work we are doing. We don't hide anything except for the location.
Yeah.
Because obviously we don't want a bunch of people going onto our site. But we're putting everything out there. We've launched a publication series on the Bahamas Maritime Museum's website, where once again, we're going to be open and transparent about our data. And I think this is one of the things that sets Island Exploration apart from what has happened in the past.
That's the most important thing, like, is transparency and sharing this data. That's my passion and why I've found treasure throughout my life. I've been very fortunate, but actually being able to exhibit it in the Maritime Museum, Bahamas Maritime Museum, and making it transparent and publicized, that's the most important thing. You know, we're going to have a lot of very exciting people on this podcast, and I look forward to it.
Oh, most definitely. We're going to bring in some of the young Bahamians we have working with us. We have the old people, or I don't want to call them the old people, but people
I'm one of the old people, Mike.
Well, people who've worked in the industry who were on board when the Maravillas was first found.
Yep.
We plan on bringing a whole bunch of guests just to really bring out the light of what's happened here in the past.
Yeah.
So we'd like to thank everybody for watching us today. And once again, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Shop Walker's Key, Maravillas Rum, Bahamas Maritime Museum, and Visit the Bahamas. But before we go, we're going to take a shot of this Maravilla rum right here for everybody.
You going to pour in a glass this time, or are we just going to drink out of the bottle?
I think we'll use some shot glasses.
Okay, I'm going to let you do it then there, Mike.
So Maravillas rum is one of the new products that are being offered through Walker's Key. I'm not sure how you can purchase it, but here you go. So a shot for me. Sorry, Dan, I always pour my shot first.
Oh, no problem.
And a shot for you.
All right, Mike, let's toast off to this podcast and all the interesting people and stories that are being told. There's a lot of very good stories here, both young Bahamians and old timers, like you said. And I'm looking forward to doing it, man.
It was a lot of fun.
Thank you.